Hi, everyone, and welcome to PK's webinar on Loyalty Tech, Creating Connected Membership with Salesforce and Mulesoft. Before we get started today with our presentation, I want to remind everyone that all attendees have been muted and today's presentation will be recorded. We encourage everyone to get involved in today's discussion by including any questions you may have in the Q&A tool within the platform. And at this point, I would like to introduce today's presenters. We have Clay Waltonhouse, SVP of Integrated Loyalty Solutions. We have Lonnie Estep, Managing Director of Loyalty and Experience Enablement, and Lou Powell, EVP of Solutions and Innovations.
Great, thanks, Chelsea. So as Chelsea said, thanks everybody for joining today. My name is Clay Waltonhouse, and I'll do just a very brief commercial on PK for those who don't know us. And then we'll really get into the discussion tee up and the conversation with all of you. So for those who don't know PK, we are an experience engineering firm. We think of ourselves as being deep experts in the moments that matter, and pride ourselves on working with consumer-obsessed and customer-obsessed organizations across both B2C and B2B verticals. And a lot of our work and a deep area of specialization at the firm is around membership and how different organizations use membership models to engage their customers, retain them, and grow lifetime value. We do this with kind of a combination of both deep design and strategy expertise, as well as technology services. So today's conversation is really going to be kind of a reflection of this slide, both a discussion around the business model of membership and how that drives business strategy, DTC, lifetime value of your customers, as well as big pieces of the technology enablement that both Lonnie and Lou are going to speak to. So we are proud to say, we consider ourselves a leader in this space. It's something that we've been recognized for by folks like Forrester. We've worked with a lot of big brands that are highly recognizable and that we think we get the benefit to learn from as we partner with them as well. And so we're hoping to bring some specific examples of these best practices to you today from some of these brands you see on this slide and some of our general points of view on this space. So let's talk a little bit about the discussion and kind of the problem statement and the tee up, and then we'll get into the content. So big picture, loyalty programs or membership programs, as we typically would call them, are playing an increasingly strategic role across a large number of verticals. And we'll get into why that is in just a few minutes. But the reality is that many of you on this call probably experienced this pain point, which is the average company has up to 91 different martech solutions in place. And a huge pain point is how do you bring all these different disparate pieces of technology, the different platforms together in a way that not only allows you to manage them effectively internally, but expose to the end customer a seamless experience. So what we're hoping to cover today, and what we hope you will walk away from this discussion with, is a better understanding of how membership models can enable connected experiences for the end customer, why you really need to focus on API strategy to complement your customer-focused loyalty strategy, why creating direct connectivity with Salesforce and Mulesoft specifically is an interesting option to consider and potentially a leading solution for you, depending on your martech stack, and how an event-driven architecture directs data back into the enterprise through APIs. And Lou's going to talk a lot about this as a deep area of focus and specialization for us. So with that said, I'll jump in a little bit to kind of the framing around membership and loyalty and the bigger picture here, and then we'll really get into the discussion on all things enablement, technology, data, APIs. So for us, we start every conversation in this space with a bit of a step back to say, when we're saying loyalty, we're really talking about loyalty as an outcome, not necessarily loyalty as a program, right? We care more about driving the behavioral and emotional response with the customers we're trying to interact with, building those relationships, extending lifetime value, And though things like monetary incentives might help incentivize customers to interact with you, they're certainly not the full picture of what creates a loyal customer base. And so with that as a bit of a macro level backdrop, we have seen and been part of this shift over the years from these very traditional loyalty and rewards program models that are really focused on traditional loyalty mechanics, right? So think about monetary incentives, think about shipping benefits if you're in the retail space. These are some tried and true aspects of loyalty and reward programs. But what has really shifted is this mindset around membership as more of a holistic orientation toward a way to capture value, to develop a value proposition for members, to incentivize people to become known. And in this shift, there's been a lot of downstream implications for brands who are managing these sorts of membership models. So one is that what you might include in the membership model is very broad. Could be services, could be content, could be access to experiences, could be partner offers, whole host of different things, not just traditional elements. And that membership models really need to be managed as a product, which is to say, they need to be managed with an ever-evolving backlog that is groomed. They are omni-channel in nature, right? The experience of membership shows up across all channels. And the disciplines involved with optimizing these membership models are an understanding of behavioral economics and what drives rational choice and decision-making with your customers, and experience design. How does this show up across channels? How can you evolve those features in an ongoing motion? So when done well, we believe membership, regardless of what's included in a membership offering, it's really doing 5 things. It's enhancing and delivering a unique brand, mission, and value proposition. It's reinforcing that. It's easing and speeding, getting value from your relationship with the brand. It's enriching interactions with the brand across all channels. So whether I'm interacting in a store environment or on property at a hotel or in a mobile app or on a website, how is membership making that interaction better by virtue of me being a member? 4th is it's an opportunity to add value-added features, services, digital tools, resources, benefits of various varieties, rewards, et cetera. And finally, it's a utility to the member themselves, in that it should allow them to have more control, choice, and flexibility over their experience with the brand. So done right, membership is really a flywheel. And you see this in a number of businesses across industries where, as a customer enrolls in membership, it's a 2-way symbiotic relationship when done right that does spin off more engagement, should drive significant improvement in retention and lifetime value. And there's a give-get relationship, right, that is mutual. The business gets increased understanding of who their customers are, increased engagement and spend, as I'd said, hopefully better advocacy from their customers. And it also serves as a channel to monetize, as the brand and test into innovative new offerings, whether that be subscription or partnerships. It's really a platform for testing and innovation. And then on the flip side, of course, the member expects a more personalized experience, more value, better service, access to things they wouldn't otherwise have, right? And so we see this showing up with all sorts of different flavors from a feature set perspective, but driving significant value to the bottom line of businesses across industries. So pivoting a little bit to today's conversation, when membership is integrated across channels, when it is managed as an omni-channel product, it is everywhere, right? And I am logged in as a customer, I'm logged in as a member, if it's a digital interaction, or I'm recognized by people if it's a physical interaction in a physical space. And this is certainly not easy work. And when we think about this omni-channel kind of landscape and this idea that members are transiting different kinds of media, different kinds of platforms, it's complicated, right? Stitching all of this together from a technology perspective is not easy when we want people to be in a logged in state, recognized, and that their experience is different at each touch point because of the fact that they're a member. And so we often talk about this idea of kind of a federated ecosystem for membership that spans different digital products, potentially different, of course, different platforms, different channels, but that it needs to be federated, it needs to be connected. One account, one member ID needs to make me known and needs to help my experience be improved across all channels. So this is a big lift, and many organizations are on a journey, to evolve and mature. Our job is to try to help them do that, right? And build the capabilities, build the strategy. And today's conversation, we're going to talk about building the technology infrastructure that's required to do this really well. And at the highest end of the curve, whether you're talking about a Nike, who I'll talk about briefly, or Amazon Prime, or a Starbucks, these are organizations where membership has really become, a flywheel. It is a major driver of their top line revenue and their bottom line profitability. So let me give just two quick examples, and then we'll get into the meat of the conversation around the technology. Nike is one of the most loved brands in the world, right? And so why would this brand, one of the largest consumer brands, well-known, well-loved everywhere, why would they need a membership program? And for them, it was really about shifting to what they called their DTC offense, right? And Nike Plus became ultimately a platform, quote unquote, for this direct-to-consumer offense, shifting their business model from selling shoes through wholesale partners to selling direct through their own digital channels and building direct relationships, building a marketable universe of customers that they had more influence over in terms of those behaviors and the emotions that we care about. And so they folded in things like member-only services, a lot of digital features and tools, a lot of exclusive access to experiences. Membership is federated across many, many different digital products like the Run Club or the Sneakers app. They've integrated this with a lot of really cool partners like Spotify or ClassPass so that members have access to local fitness classes in their community. And it's all a digital platform for a relationship that can now be personalized and can serve as a tool for better understanding and better serving that end customer. Disney is a totally different industry, not retail, media and entertainment company. And again, one of the most successful consumer brands in the world, right? They inspire deep loyalty. They are incredible at making these magical moments that inspire an emotional reaction. And for them, the shift is similar around how to grow this marketable universe, how to grow this DTC business model, and membership is at the center of that. So the Disney Movie Insiders program is giving Disney fans a way to become known, to interact with content in a more personalized way. And this is a program that's similar to Nike, is integrated with both first-party digital platforms and third-party. So if I'm a member of the Disney Movie Insiders program, I can connect my Movies Anywhere account, which is where I might be hosting and storing digital movies in the cloud, which is a service that Disney offers. But I might also connect my Regal accounts or my Fandango accounts, right? And this gives Disney the ability to see when I'm going to a movie in a local movie theater, gives them the ability to actually impact that experience other than just sitting down and watching it on the big screen. Disney can now intersect me in those moments in a third-party environment and try to improve that experience, reach out to me, communicate with me, give me a platform to engage around it. And so they're really using this as a mechanism for curating a fan's experience based on their affinity to individual movie franchises, whether that be Star Wars or Pixar or Disney Animation or Marvel, et cetera, et cetera. So really interesting, two completely different industries, but both using membership as a key central driver for their growth and their innovation as a business. So with that said, I'm going to turn this over to Lonnie who's our guru of all things loyalty enablement. And he's going to talk a little bit about kind of, the strategy side of building an ecosystem digitally that can actually unlock and enable the sorts of things that we just spoke about. Lonnie, over to you.
Thanks, Clay. So as Clay said, right, building an omni-channel experience, there's no doubt you have lots of systems in your organization. So how do you stitch those all together, right? And then you have to look at this probably from two lenses. So, from a Salesforce perspective or a partner perspective or vendor, right? They're probably going to have cartridges or accelerators that connect their own systems together, but that's not probably going to be sufficient. You're still probably going to need an experience layer to bring all this stuff together, an API strategy that's going to move the data across these stacks to provide that seamless experience. And why that's important is, as Clay alluded to, is loyalty has evolved, right? Customer expectations are changing. We have to meet them in that moment. We have to drive that experience across multiple devices, across multiple touch points. And that's not just, perhaps digital. You have to think about what is your in-store experience? What are those requirements? What is your in-restaurant experience? What do you need to light that up? I'm sure during COVID, right, we did a lot of BOPUS work. We did a lot of customer service work. That can be levers of loyalty tactics, right? So you have to have the right foundation in place to have that agility to be able to turn those levers on when you need them. So part of our philosophy is making sure that we define the right digital foundation and we align on the systems that you have in place and what the role of those systems are going to be. The other challenge that we see is there's a lot of overlap today, right? Loyalty is not no longer just a monetary points offering anymore, right? It's heavily experienced. So there's a lot of loyalty platforms that have offers, that have campaigns, that have analytics. How does that fit into the rest of your organization's platform stacks, right? Your ecosystem. So where should the source systems for offers be? What's your omni-channel strategy for coupons and promos? What is your data strategy, right? What analytics should you get out of the loyalty system? What analytics should be pushed to your enterprise analytics system? So all that requires, and Lou's going to touch on this, really, a comprehensive API strategy to move that data. We don't want to just move data to move data as well. We also probably want to macro segment data. So we want to write data in streams where we can maybe package that up. So by the time it gets to our stack for targeting and personalization, we already have some micro segments ready to go. Orchestrating that data is important as well. Having an IDM strategy around account strategy, one account strategy is probably important. But with all that said, creating that digital foundation and realizing that it is a journey, right? You're not going to get to the end state in day one. But you also can't wait because of the disruption in the customer expectations to go through a long strategy session and start building your enablement after that, right? So we believe that it's important to do this in parallel. There's things that you can set up as a digital foundation and start moving on that while you're developing a strategy or revisualizing your strategy. It's important to make sure that you have those things in place. And how you connect and interconnect those systems are key. So, how you connect the POS, what kind of POS features that you need to have in person. Can you enroll through the POS? What type of data do you need? What is the data strategy? What is the recommendation engine, right? If you're on Salesforce, is it Einstein or do you have another product recommendation engine? So these things become complicated, and a lot of it is really spending a lot of time just getting the organizational alignment around the roles of these systems before we can start really diving into more of the technical aspect of what APIs do we need to light up these features. We can go to the next slide. So the one thing about loyalty that I find interesting, and Lou will probably elaborate this a little bit more when he talks about API, is loyalty has a lot of the same problem statements as you would with personalization, as you would with creating a digital ecosystem that is designed for engagement. So, what is you need a good strategy. What is your good experience design? You need time to market, right? That we're going to talk about APIs interconnecting is important. Personalization and privacy and compliance. All those things factor in here. We're not going to talk about compliance today. That's probably a whole nother webinar that probably nobody would attend. But compliance itself is very complicated, right? So what are the nuances and, CCPA, GDPR, does that apply to loyalty member data, terms and conditions? All that stuff needs to be factored in. And then what type of data that we collect to make actionable within a CDP or within your real-time database is also important, right? And how do we get those insights out? So the problem statements are very common. What we see today is companies are struggling to go beyond what we consider to be traditional personalization. A lot of companies can do campaigns and can do personal offers, but is it really one-to-one? Right? Are you really targeting it? And are you targeting that person in the moment? So when I walk into a store or I walk into a place of business, right? Am I getting reminders pushed to my phone that this was in my shopping cart, or I looked at this product, or or perhaps if I'm an oil company, do I have a bay open and there's a $5 offer if I pull in right away? So that's all complicated stuff that needs to be architected correctly and have a solid digital foundation. And if you don't do that work up front, it really leads to a lot of rework, a lot of technology debt, and an increased total cost of ownership. So these are things that we typically look at and we try to address with our strategy. So enablement, we consider enablement a strategy. It's not just technical work. It's like, what is our enablement strategy? We have to define that at the beginning, just like we do our program strategy. We need to define the gaps. Do we have systems that can do these things, right? And once we do that, part of what we do of the overall strategy is, do we have the right resources to run this thing and maintain it going forward, right? So part of that is digital governance, which we also believe is very tightly coupled with loyalty programs. So how do we ensure that we get these things to market? How do we manage this going forward? Those are all key aspects that we want to define as we kind of go forward in this journey. We can go to the next slide. So no surprise, most of you probably know Salesforce launched Salesforce Loyalty, is one of their new offers. It's part of their core, which is really, really cool. It's it's an engine. But Salesforce is a deep ecosystem, right? They have lots of offerings. So, how do you bring that together with Interaction Studio? How do you bring that together with Service Cloud? How do you integrate that with Salesforce Marketing Cloud, right? So back to, which one's going to do journey execution, which one's going to do campaign execution? Are they both going to do that? So all those decisions have to be made up front. There's a lot of features with the Salesforce engine that you can get, that you can see on the screen, right? So a lot of capabilities that we want to light up. But again, requires a comprehensive strategy. Also requires, how do we light those up across the ecosystem that aren't Salesforce stacks, right? We are definitely, enterprises are not typically going to be 100% Salesforce or an Adobe stack environment, right? So there's always going to be a hybrid kind of approach and different stacks that we have to integrate. And doing that well and having that strategy is key to making sure that we have success and that we can drive the right experience. And this goes into progressive profiling. So it's something as simple as progressive profiling, which is probably on everybody's list as a marketer, can be a complex topic, right? So where's that data going to fly? How do you make that ad hoc? How do I enable the marketer to be able to do those progressive profiling engagement questions on the fly, and have an infrastructure that's flexible enough to suck that data back into our system of record to do this type of targeted recommendations or targeted experience that we want to target them with. So those things are in themselves can be very complicated and require a lot of strategy to think about how we want to do that effectively. We can go to the next slide. So back to Salesforce Loyalty, as we just said, right? I mean, Salesforce have lots of products. So this is an architecture slide that shows you some of the complexity you have to think about. Heavily focused on a Salesforce stack. So, how are you going to connect Salesforce Commerce to the core? How are you going to potentially use Heroku? Do you need to use Heroku? How are you going to use connectors from Salesforce Marketing to the core? And under that, which Lou's going to talk about, is the broader API strategy of, how do we take that to the next level where we can call those services to drive and collect the data and the packets that we need, not only to drive experience, but to also give us insights into the things that our customers are doing, so we can take the next best action. The one thing I would say before I pass over to Lou is that we deal with clients, and we get this question a lot. Build versus buy is obviously a question. But the next question is, well, I want to do this in multiple stacks. We do campaigns in marketing, we do campaigns in our loyalty stack. There's no right or wrong answer, but you have to think about the impact of that with AI and the way AI is changing and in the AI engines within these platforms. It's a key consideration, right? So if I'm splitting that across multiple stacks, then your system of engagement, let's just say Salesforce Marketing Cloud, may not have all the data that it needs to actually function correctly for that AI engine to do the next step, right? The next best action, because that data is now siloed. So you have to think about the strategy around that as well. So it's why it's important that we spend a lot of time upfront defining the systems, what role they're going to play, how that data is going to flow, and the type of experience and engagement and connectivity we need to make this all come to fruition. So we can go to the next slide. So I'm going to pass it over to Lou, Lou's going to go a lot more technical than me. He probably talk all day about API strategy, but it is very, very important. We do have an experience accelerator because we know this is just so crucial for success. So Lou.
Thanks, Lonnie. I'll try not to get too technical. I'll try to express concepts without getting real deep. But the first thing that I like to talk about is, the motivation for an API. So a lot of folks use that term API sometimes when they mean just an integration into something, but APIs are actually intended for multiple consumers trying to use the same capability. So when we look at that, there's some really important value to that. So one is just managing the consistency of the data and the experience that you're delivering across channels by allowing that API to be represented and give the same answers to the same questions, no matter if it's the consumer on their mobile application, on their laptop, through the POS, in the store, in the call center. All of these things are delivering the same data. So that's a really big part of a great API. And it also creates that ready to use experience as well, that when you're ready to build that next experience, that API is built based on a capability and it's ready to go. You can just go consume it. So next slide. Yeah, so this is one of my big statements here, and this is something that we think is really important. We think that democratization and consumer independence are the hallmarks of great API programs. And when we talk about that, democratization speaks to the idea that the capabilities that you need and that you are interested in are available to you and easy to access without hurdles, without gates. So that's the concept of democratization. So are all the things that you need to go create great experiences to marshal your loyalty experiences, are all of those things available to you? And then the second part of that is consumer independence. And when I say that, we're talking about the API consumer, the person who's building those experiences. And independence speaks to, is it built for their purpose? Is it easy for them to use? Is it comprehensible? Does it make sense? Or am I going to have to schedule an appointment that I can't get for 2 weeks with somebody in IT and spend the next 3 months trying to crack open a black box to understand how to gain access to that capability? So we would look at that and say, absolutely not consumer independent. Great consumer independent capabilities are easy to understand, easy to consume, easy to test, easy to integrate, and easy to get feedback on. So that's when you've achieved that, you've got a great API program. So there's this concept of creating consumer independence. It's about productization. And the question that a lot of folks, why do we need to productize our APIs? And number one, it's APIs are the mechanism for connecting the world, right? You are not doing anything through direct connectivity anymore. And productizing your APIs aligns the purpose and the value that you're trying to derive with what your consumers are trying to do. So when we productize things, you look at what is the consumer's problem that they're trying to solve, rather than how do I give you the data I've got. So that consumer alignment is really an important shift in mentality. And a lot of times people are looking at access to data, and really access to data on its own can still be a non-starter. So access to data, yes, but access to data that's easy to access and understand is paramount. So building this digital value chain with that API as that value in the middle is critical. And these are the aspects that I like to look at when we talk about a product. So it's the problem, the fit, and the quality. And all good products have all of those things, right? When you think about it, you go, the Roomba. If anybody's got one of those, I love it. It's a crazy device, but you look at it, you go, does it solve the problem? You go, yes, I've got cats. There's dust bunnies all over my house. So the Roomba solves a problem that I've got. So that's great. I've got this problem of, cat hair dust balls rolling across my floor, and the Roomba solves that problem. But does it fit the solution in a great way? So if it was, a solution that was awkward and I had to go buy new plugin to make it work, I'd look at that and go, well, it's a really interesting idea, but it doesn't fit very well. It's not easy to use. It's really not doing a great job of solving my problem. And then the last part of that is quality. If it breaks down all the time, you look at it and go, that's a terrible product. And in an API world, it's the same thing. You can think about, like, if Google Maps had a map and you needed to solve a mapping problem to find stores, you go, well, that's great. But if the user interface on it was really bad and hard to use, you go, well, that's not a great product. Or if the quality of it wasn't available all the time, it went down and it wasn't highly available, or the data isn't updated and the stores aren't being updated properly, you go, that's a bad quality API. So building a great quality product is about solving a consumer's problem in a really consumer-oriented way that fits their problem and in a quality fashion. And when all those pieces come together, you've got a great product. So typical challenges that we find in businesses trying to build connected experiences are that APIs don't exist. The API in the queue for next year, right? We're going to build that at some point. The expert I need to understand is not available. APIs are changing, and it requires me to change my app, which is a big problem that we're having with several customers in the way that they built their APIs. Inconsistencies. This is a big challenge where I've got 9 APIs I need to access and they all behave differently. The way I authenticate, the way that they communicate, the error messages, all different. So essentially, I'm working with one company and it feels like I've got 9 different companies I'm integrating with. And the last one is inconsistency of security. So these are typical challenges that we find companies facing. The next statement that I would look at is we start looking at building our API solution. And Clay touched on this and did a masterful job of illustrating this with Disney and Nike, that we need to be focused on the ecosystem. So third party, and when you think about it, necessary third parties that help us deliver what we do, as well as third parties who add to our story, who add to our value proposition and create better experiences for our customers. Therefore, that is something that we want to be integrated into. All of those things start to become a part of our whole ecosystem. So building that ecosystem is going to require that you not only integrate inside of your enterprise, but you have a lot of integrations and things going on outside of your enterprise. So with your 95 martech concerns, you've now got all of your internal concerns plus all of your external concerns. Your API ecosystem becomes a really, really sophisticated place. So what value does the gateway provide? So the Mulesoft gateway. So a lot of times we see folks building experiences, jumping out there quickly and directly integrating into the platforms and consuming APIs. And you can certainly get it done like that. But some of the challenges that you run into are that tightly coupled integration has to now be done over and over again through all of your consumers. So every one of your platforms now need to understand how to integrate into Salesforce and consume all of those capabilities, which some of them are not so straightforward in understanding how to consume them. We talked about the consumer independence story. A part of the value of creating that gateway is that we can do a lot of things to make this an easier task as we bring on lots of channels and lots of experiences connected to these capabilities. So one of the values is we've got a one-stop shop. So if I'm working with APIs all over the enterprise, if I'm working with APIs from third parties, I'm working with APIs from all of my ecosystem concerns, you can see where it'd be really difficult to understand, where do I go to get that? The API gateway gives me a centralized place for access. I can now connect to all of my data concerns through APIs in a single place. So that's a big value. The second part is it protects it protects the consumers from the end systems, right? From the source systems. So when that source system or API changes, you have the ability at the gateway to make a choice. How do I want to represent that? So I can change my backend system and have my API look and behave exactly the way that it did before. That's a really big advantage. I can now shift from moving out of one martech system into another martech system and transition without disrupting any of my consumer experiences. That's a really big advantage when it comes to maintaining and managing all of those consumer experiences over time. The next piece is that consistency of security. And it's not just for the API consumer, it's also the consistency of security for the consumer, meaning that the way that you secure things can now be done very consistently, where you're using that consumer's credentials, you're passing them through the gateway, which is giving them core information that they can use for creating authentication and authorizations to all of the data they should gain access to. So it creates higher security, but it also creates better experiences because they're more consistent. And then ability to transform an API or an app developer understanding. So transforming your language. In other words, if I connect into my Salesforce system and some of the language doesn't make sense to the consumer, I can actually change that in the gateway and make it easier to understand. So it gives me the ability to kind of do some translation and make things easier to understand. It gives me visibility to analytics, who's using that data, which connections are consuming what data. And it also formalizes requisitioning so that I have a single place where I can say, can I have that? And we can say no, or yes, of course you can have all these things because you do this with us. So we can kind of create these categories of consumption. And when somebody needs things, we give them all the things that they need. So gateways give us the ability to requisition in a simple and consumer-oriented way. And then the last thing I wanted to talk about was establishing an event architecture. And we look at event architectures as a necessary part of your enterprise architecture. And we also look at them as a very tight relationship with APIs. We love the idea of events being a way, or APIs being a way to establish connectivity to create events and to consume events. And this is starting to become a really, really common pattern. And in today's world where we look at, Clay had mentioned earlier the BOIPUS thing where you look at it, you go, okay, now all of a sudden I've got this new thing that I've never done before. And there's two big challenges that I've never had to really work with as some of these stores are finding out. One of them was, what inventory do I have at a store? That was something that the store dealt with, but you never had to present that online, where you went, well, wait a minute, somebody who's not in the store now needs to know exactly what I've got in the store. And by the way, for consumer experience, that's got to be pretty accurate. So I've got to produce real-time inventory. So this started to become there's a new event-oriented thing. And the other thing was, somebody's sitting outside waiting for me to bring that package to them. So there's another event-oriented thing that says, Nancy pulled up and she would like for us to bring her products to her, and she's been here for 20 minutes. We need to go out there and take care of it. It's that idea of managing the consumer experience. And when you're getting overwhelmed, being able to at least communicate and manage consumer expectations, all event oriented, as well as supply chain and all of the things that we're dealing with trucking and e-commerce and telematic data. So there's all kinds of stuff going on. And the challenge is, how do I simplify it down to events that matter to the people who are creating experiences? So as you look on the page here, you can see I'm looking at the kinds of things that you're really interested in. You don't want to know about all that complexity of what it takes to get the data from here to there when it happens. You just want to know, hey, did somebody create a new shopping cart? Did somebody create an order? Did someone sign up for rewards? Did someone get some new rewards added? Do I need to let somebody know that their rewards are expiring? These are all events. And the idea is, we want to be able to publish and in real time respond to those. And the value of an event-oriented architecture is that we can have producers and consumers operating independently. You can have somebody create an event, and then you can have somebody consume and respond to that event, or many people consume and respond to that event at their own pace. So this, from PK's perspective, is a critical part of your success to building great future experiences.
Lou, I might chime in just a little bit to kind of bring this full circle for everybody on the webinar here. We started with this very high level kind of conversation around, modern loyalty programs, membership models, how they're playing a hugely strategic role in driving the business and the experience of the end customer across industries right now. And so to ladder off of what Lou's talking about a little bit, and for those of you who may be more on the marketing side or the product strategy side of the house, this is really about using APIs, event architecture, and really thoughtful strategy in this space to make it easier for your partners internally to develop new loyalty or membership features. How do we make our delivery of that membership roadmap faster, easier, higher quality, and more future-proof, through a architecture design that is more nimble, right? And that our developers can move faster in this environment because they can get access to the data they need to build the new products or the new experiences that are on your roadmap for the membership program, for the member experience. So just wanted to try to kind of, bring that all together from the high level view around membership and where it's going in the space, all the way down to the ground level around the role that APIs play in enabling, agility and velocity of delivering a member experience, and doing so in a way that is future-proofed, because it will be easier to change out underlying technology as your roadmap and as your technology environment evolves over time. So hopefully you all found this interesting, and I'm going to turn it over to Chelsea for Q&A.
Thanks, Clay. So now we have time for a few of your questions. And just as a reminder, you can continue to submit questions through the Q&A platform at this time. One of the questions looks like, how are organizations dealing with data privacy concerns when exposing data via APIs to third parties? Lou, is that one you could answer?
Sure. Well, yeah, that's a multifaceted question. So exposing data to third parties. So, the things that we would look at is, one, ensuring that you've got a secure mechanism for transferring and sharing that data, where you can ensure that only the parties that are expected to see the data get to see the data. Making sure that your instruments, legal instruments, are in place and well understood. And then the last part of that, and this is where we see a lot of shortcomings, is distributing only the right amount of data, and that becomes a big challenge, where you look at it and go, don't just deliver because you've got this data readily available, but make sure you're paring it down to the minimal amount of data necessary, and wherever possible, you're de-identifying that data. So if the third party is interested in data, but they're not necessarily in need of something that identifies a person, then de-identifying that data so that you can understand statistics and information without having to reveal individual information is always preferable.
I'll just chime in and say, I think that's a really interesting and good question too, because as we were highlighting with Nike and Disney, the third-party integrations they have with partners who are a big part of the value proposition of membership, right? So Spotify or ClassPass at Nike, or Fandango and Regal theaters, at Disney. So having a robust capability around how you're going to manage APIs and data sharing, privacy and security concerns. We talk about a membership ecosystem as being semi-permeable, which the idea being that, there's your first party ecosystem that's a closed border, and then there's these third party partnerships who may be part of the membership value prop, and that you need to have these fundamentals in place around secure APIs and data sharing to do this nimbly, to bring new partners on board. To Lou's point, how do you productize those APIs for third-party consumption so you can onboard new partners as part of the membership experience more quickly? So really an interesting and quickly evolving, area where these two topics intersect.
Great answers. So a second question we have are, what are some of the bigger innovations or changes in loyalty tech over the past couple of years? Lonnie, is that one you could answer?
Yeah, I think it's really the ability to drive these experiences quickly and fastly throughout the stack, and platforms and vendors are making a lot of stride in this, right? So, you got Salesforce with Interaction Studio, you've got Adobe with their offerings. So realizing that, not just personalization, but, building that brand affinity within the moment specific to that person, And identifying that across channels is probably the biggest innovation. So I've looked at something on my mobile device, and then when I look later online at night, I see the same product and the same reminder, kind of pick up where I left off in my experience, regardless of what device I've been on. And then within, probably I'd say within retailing, right? I think still early, but I think customer service evolution is getting a lot of attention. So, what do we do in that space, and how do those things happen? So there's a lot of integration now with customer service, but there's a lot of things that can still be turned on and enabled through that lens as well. So that's going to be exciting to watch. All that ties into the standard stuff, product recommendation, journey flow, journey mapping. But I think really the innovation is, how do I leverage that data to engage with that consumer across the stack and give that seamless experience and identify that user has really kind of been, at least from my experience, where I've seen the biggest changes, right? So, and a lot of the major platforms have that capability now. What's interesting though is not a lot of clients have enabled that functionality. So that's really the struggle, right? So, if you got the Adobe stack, right, there's omnichannel features that you can turn on. You've got the Salesforce stack. There's omnichannel features that you can turn on to kind of identify that user across devices and cross channels. But it's just interesting to us when we go engage with clients that those are either further down on the backlog or they haven't been enabled yet. And a lot of that is what Lou was talking about, right? When you start talking about loyalty and enabling these things, the backlog becomes very quick, very fast, right? Because you don't have a solid foundation yet. Well, maybe solid's not the right word. You haven't aligned your foundation yet. So you spend a lot of time like house cleaning things in order, and really, instead of enabling the features that were originally put on the scope. So short answer is, I think the omni-channel experience and identifying that user across the stack and delivering that seamless experience is where a lot of the investment's been.
Great, thank you, Lonnie. Well, due to time, we'll have to answer the remaining questions offline. I do want to remind everybody we will be sending a recording of the presentation in the next day or so. So please be sure to check your inbox for the email, which will also include different ways that you can get in touch with us. Thank you so much, Clay, Lonnie, and Lou, for your presentation.
Thank you.
And then thank you everyone for joining. We appreciate you being here, and we hope to see you in our future webinars.